Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. I'm excited to be joined by Jeff Gothelf, who will be presenting on Forever Employable, how to ensure your career stays as agile as your work. So in a moment, I'll pass over to Jeff, but just before I do, I'd like to let everyone know that we'll have a poll question and we'll finish the session with a Q&A section. So if you have any questions throughout the webinar, please send these into the question tab, and we hopefully have time to answer all of these. If we do run out of time during the session, don't worry. Jeff has kindly agreed to follow up following the webinar with his answers. So without further ado, I'll pass over to Jeff, who'll be able to start the session.
Excellent, thank you, Paul. Hey, folks, nice to be here, and thank you so much for spending an hour with me here today. My goal is to make it an interesting, fun, and hopefully actionable hour for you as I share with you the story about becoming forever employable and really thinking about your career in a whole different light, really trying to think about future-proofing your career, building a career safety net or career insurance, if you will, focused on your expertise. And a lot of the story is covered in the book I published recently of the same name called Forever Employable. The book is semi-autobiographical. It tells my story, and I'm going to share with you that story today. And as I do so, I'm going to give you practical tips and tricks throughout to help give you a sense of where to start at the end of this particular presentation. So let's just jump into it and we'll get started. So the story starts on January 31st, 2008. January 31st, 2008 was my 35th birthday. It was the morning of my 35th birthday. And on the morning of my 35th birthday, I woke up in a cold sweat. I woke up in a bit of a panic, and it wasn't clear to me exactly why this was the case, because really, and when I was 35, everything was pretty good. This is me at 35. I had like 7 more hairs on my head. That's about it. But those are my girls when I was 35, just to give you a sense of where they are today. The older one is going off to university in about 6 months, which is terrifying. And the younger one is starting high school as well in the same time period. So time does fly, but this is me at 35. And up until that point, I had a pretty good run. Things had gone pretty well for me at the time. I started off as a broke musician. I played music in bands. I toured around the United States with my friends. And really trying to be a rock star. I kind of gave it a real shot, and sadly, it didn't really work out. But the good news is that right around the year 1999 or so, the internet happened, and the internet kind of saved me from this and gave me an opportunity to rethink my career away from being a touring musician towards a web designer. And in fact, in 1999, I got my first job, real job anyway, after university, at a company called IXL. IXL was one of the big Web 1.0 consulting companies, one of those classic stories of massive growth, hyper growth. A CEO in his mid-20s, all of us were just learning on the job. And it was, those were heady times back then. I mean, honestly, I got the job because I could spell HTML. That was about the only requirement you needed to get a job. And I got a job as a web designer. I was doing basic graphic design and HTML markup. You can't even call it coding. I was just, writing the markup code that made websites appear on the internet, which was brand new and exciting in 1999. And then one day, my boss came and he gave us this book. And this book is called Information Architecture for the World Wide Web. It is in its 4th edition today, more than 20 years later. And really, this book really changed my life. The boss came in and said, "Hey, who wants to be an information architect?" And none of us kind of knew what that meant, but he said, "Look, there's a book on it. Why don't you read this book?" And so I took the book home. I read it over the weekend. I came back and I said, "This is what I want to do. I want to become an information architect," because for me, it moved me up in the decision-making funnel. So as a web designer, I was the last person in the production funnel, right? Everything had been decided up until that point. And then I said, "Jeff, go ahead and design and build this." I did it and we shipped it. Information architecture moved me up the decision-making funnel and gave me the opportunity to help define the layout of the website, the design of the information, the navigation, that type of thing. And that appealed to me. And so I took that job, and that really set me down a career path. I finally had a direction to go down, which was not just web design, but initially information architecture, user experience design, interaction design, and so forth. And so there I go, full speed ahead, finally got a career, no longer a broke musician, actually getting a paycheck every couple of weeks. And crap, the .com bubble burst, right? And I found myself bouncing around again, just kind of trying to figure out how to land on my feet and stay employed as all of these Web 1.0 companies were imploding. I spent some time, excuse me, at a company called America Online. You may have heard of it, making the software that went on these CDs. If you've ever received an America Online CD between the years of 2002 to 2006, you're welcome. I've worked on that software, so I did some design there. I worked on the West Coast of the United States, doing some work at a company called WebTrends. And then about 10 years into my career, I found myself back in New York City as the director of user experience and design at a company called The Ladders in New York. It was a high growth startup. And what I realized at that point, this is right around the time I was turning 35. And 10 years into my career, I'd clawed my way up to middle management, right? That's where I'd gotten there. And like I said, things were pretty good. I had a decent salary. I was managing a team. I had a house in the suburbs, commuting into the city every day. And so I wake up on the morning of my 35th birthday, and I'm in a panic, I'm in a cold sweat, and I can't figure out why. And then it dawns on me. It dawns on me that in 5 years from when I was 35, I'm going to be 40 years old. And when you're 35, 40 is the end of the world. I'm 48 now, 40 would be amazing. I'll take that any day. But when you're 35, 40 is the end of the world. And I'm like, look, I'm going to be 40 in 4 years. And in my job, I was a hiring manager, and I was hiring all these younger designers. And for me, the way that I was seeing them is that they were younger than me. They had more free time than me. They were hungrier than me, and most importantly, they were cheaper than me. And I was concerned that in 5 years, I would become too expensive, underskilled, and unemployable. And that was unacceptable to me, because you saw my kids, they were cute, and kids got to eat every day. And so I've got to provide for the family, and that was a ton of pressure. And that's why I woke up with a cold sweat in the morning of my 35th birthday. And so I realized that something had to change. And so on that morning, I made a resolution. And the resolution was fairly significant, because it really started to recast how I approached my career and how I moved forward. The resolution was this: I was no longer going to look for jobs. My belief was that I was going to start to lose job opportunities more frequently. I had been pretty lucky, as I showed you, kind of throughout my career, the first decade, even through the .com bubble burst, I've been pretty lucky. My expectation was that I was going to start to lose more and more of these job offers. So I was going to stop doing that, because clearly that was not going to be a winning strategy. And I was going to change the dynamic of my job search, of my career. Instead of me looking for work, I was going to create a dynamic where work was looking for me, right? So if you think about this in a systems thinking approach, right, from a systems thinking perspective, traditional job search, traditional career growth is a push system. You push yourself into opportunities. You push yourself into applying for a job, and you relinquish control to the hiring manager, to the employer, to the recruiter. They select you, they interview you, they decide if they're going to hire you. Instead, what I wanted to create was a 180-degree reversal of that. I wanted to create a pull system where I was constantly attracting opportunities to me and putting myself in the driver's seat about what I chose to do and what I didn't choose to do. Right, and that's what I decided to do. And I know what you're saying. You said, you're like, wow, Jeff, those are amazing words, absolutely mind blowing. You're great words. But right, this brings up a lot of key questions, a lot of very, very important questions that I immediately set out to answer. Question number one, does anyone know who I am? Right? If jobs are going to find me, if I'm going to create the situation where opportunities are coming towards me, does anyone know who I am? Right? Because if they don't know me, why would they look for me? Number one. Okay. Well, how would they even know to look for me? Second question, why would they look for me? So if they know who I am, right, why are they coming for me? What problem am I helping them solve? What do they know me for? What am I known for? Right? What would attract them to me in the first place, even if they knew my name? How would they find me? Right, so it's 2008, right? 2008, we've got Google, we've got LinkedIn, we've got Facebook, we've got all of these, we've got the internet, right? There's lots of ways to find me. Where do I want to live online so that people find me consistently and know to look there for the kinds of problems that I help them solve? And then perhaps equally as important as the rest of these is, if I'm successful in all of this, what kind of work do I want to attract to myself? Right? I don't want just any work. I want meaningful, interesting stuff that moves my career forward. And I set out to answer these questions. And look, in hindsight, I would argue that the second question here is probably the most important one, is to get to understand at the beginning of this type of journey, is why would people look for you? And I want to pose that question to you as a group of folks attending this talk. There's a lot of you in this presentation, and you have access to the chat. And so if you were to think about an answer to this question, why would jobs look for you? Or another way to frame the question is, what problem do you help people solve? What would it be? And I'd love to see some answers in the chat, if you could put some ideas in the chat there. The thing, right, try to move away from job titles, right? People immediately, when you ask people this question, the first thing that they jump to is a job title. I'm a project manager. People look for me because I manage projects. Well, yes, but dig a little deeper. What's the problem that your project management solves for people, right? It helps them manage a group of folks, like make a group of disparate folks cohesive and lead them from point A to point B on time and on budget, right? That's the problem that I help solve. And so I don't know if you've got any thoughts about why would jobs look for you. What would you put in there? Can you put it in the chat? I wonder if I can see the chat. I've got it on my screen.
I've got them all coming to me, Jeff. So what I'll do is I'll pass them over to you in the chat, so you've got them.
Okay, yeah, because I see nothing.
Yeah, don't worry. I'll drop them in there, and you can continue. And obviously,
terrific. I'd love to see a couple of these if you can drop them in. Okay. Okay. Well, in any case, as you put those in there, Paul's going to share them with me in the chat here. Who knew that chat doesn't mean chat with you? It just means chat between Paul and myself. But live and learn and keep moving forward, right? So really thinking this through, right? What is the problem that you help people solve? And when you start to figure out what problem you're actually helping people solve, what you can do is then you can leverage that, right, to start to make yourself more present. Now, this is what I decided to do. Okay, I'm getting a couple of these now, which is great, right? Improving an organization's ability to serve its customers far better and for less cost. Exactly, that's the kind of stuff that we're looking for here. Now, look, what I realized I needed to do in order to get people to look for me is to create a platform for myself, and then to use that platform as a magnet to pull opportunities. It's an opportunity magnet. Now, for me, as far as I knew, a platform consisted of three things: my expertise and my experience, content generated from that, and an audience. And those three things together build that platform. And when I turned 35, that's exactly what I set out to do. And I spent the last 10 plus years, at this point it's 13 years, building my platform. And over time, I've realized that there were 5 qualities that I found in myself that I needed to become forever employable. And specifically, I took 5 steps to get there. And when you put those ideas together, I'm going to go through each one of these qualities and each one of these steps together here. But when you put these things together, the big realization that I made for myself is this idea that if you want to create this platform, if you want to stay forever employable, if you want to create the kind of opportunity magnet that I'm describing here, then you have to treat your career and your professional development as a product. You are a product. You provide a service to customers. Those customers are your colleagues, your teammates, your employers, headhunters, recruiters, the industry, the market. And you have to continuously improve and share that service with that target audience so that you can start to generate these opportunities through building that platform. Now, to do this, I discovered that there were 5 qualities that I had in myself in order to achieve this platform and start to attract opportunities towards me. And these are the 5 qualities: entrepreneurialism, self-confidence, continuous learning, continuous improvement, and reinvention. And let's take a look at each one. Now, this one's a tough one, right? Entrepreneurialism. I never thought of myself as an entrepreneur. I was never the ideas guy. I was always the execution guy. So if you had a good idea, I'll help you get it done. But as I mentioned to you earlier, I used to be in bands, and bands, as it turns out, are startups. Bands are you and your friends get together. You have this crazy idea that's going to change the world. You believe in it wholeheartedly. You spend everything you have, every waking moment, every penny, every ounce of effort into making this thing real, and you're trying to get the world to buy into this. That's entrepreneurialism, right? That's launching a startup. That's launching a business. And I had done that. I'd done that for a long time. And in fact, not only did I play in the bands, but I actually managed the bands as well. And so I had this entrepreneurial spirit in me to start to launch my thought leadership and my personal branding efforts into the industry, right, in public. I just had to go find and figure out where that entrepreneurialism came from. And I had that experience, as it turns out. Self-confidence is really interesting, right? Self-confidence is something that, again, I learned a lot from being on stage, frankly, with bands, and being confident that I could navigate any situation. And in thinking through kind of the experiences in my life that have helped me build up my self-confidence, one of the stories that I tell all the time these days is about the 6 months that I spent in the circus. Now, you might say to yourself, well, Jeff, that's amazing. You spent 6 months in the circus? And my answer to you is yes, I did spend 6 months in the circus, and it was not amazing. It was awful, and I was miserable. But I learned a ton. I spent 6 months on the road. I was 22. I graduated from university on a Saturday. I put all my stuff, all my worldly belongings in storage on the following Sunday. And by the way, all my worldly belongings consisted of a mattress, my motorcycle, and a Bob Marley poster. That was about it. And on Monday, I joined this circus, and I spent 6 months on the road touring with this circus. And it was a pretty miserable experience for 6 months, but I learned in 6 months how to navigate a strange community, how to build relationships and alliances, how to not only survive, but thrive and be successful. And really, at the end of those 6 months, it really made it clear to me that I had the confidence then that I could succeed anywhere, that I could overcome anything. And so I was leaning into that self-confidence as I started to build my expertise and share that with my community. Continuous learning is something that I've always had within me, but it's something that you can practice and get better at, right? This is something you want to read, you want to speak with others, you want to engage in your community, you want to ask questions, challenge some other folks' ideas politely, of course, but the idea is that you're always building expertise in your domain, in your industry, so that you're always getting smarter, that you're always relevant to the community as well. And then you're taking those learnings and you are making yourself better, and you're seeking opportunities to improve yourself continuously as well. There is a phrase I love that I learned in a TED Talk, which is the most cliche thing you can say ever these days. But I did learn it in a TED Talk, and it's a TED Talk by the guy who runs X, which is Google's or Alphabet's moonshot factory. It's their innovation lab. And the guy's name is Astro Teller, which is, again, it's kind of an amazing name. And in that talk, he shares this idea of enthusiastic skepticism. I love that concept. Enthusiastic skepticism means that I feel comfortable, I'm good with what I'm doing, and I feel good about it, but I'm skeptical that it's the best that I can be, right? There's always a better way or more that I can do or something different or an improvement that I can make. And so I'm enthusiastic about finding that. And that's what enthusiastic skepticism means to me, and that's how it drives this continuous improvement. It makes you more relevant to your community. Now, this photo here that you're seeing here, we're coming up on the 1-year anniversary of this photo. This is taken March 13th, 2020 in Paris, France, which is the last time I taught a class in front of real human beings and not in front of this camera and this screen over here. The reason I'm showing you this photo is because I co-teach this particular class with my friend and colleague Jeff Patton. I only teach with other guys named Jeff, by the way. That's my sole criteria. But the reason why I co-teach with Jeff and with others as well is because I learn from them. Jeff and I teach the same stuff, but he comes at it from a very different perspective. And I'm enthusiastically skeptical that I'm the best teacher of product management, of lean UX, of lean startup, of organizational agility or objectives and key results, right? There are lots of other ways to do that. And I'm always seeking those opportunities out, both to read, but also to work with others so that I can improve continuously. And then the last quality is reinvention, right? And so the things that got you here will not get you there. The pace of change is simply too fast these days. And so what we have to continuously do is understand how we can reinvent ourselves as the world around us changes very, very quickly. The article that you see on the screen in front of you right now is an article I wrote for Harvard Business Review last year. And it's about taking everything that I teach to product development teams. So primarily I work with software teams and design teams, digital product teams. But how do you take those same ideas of agility and design thinking and lean startup and continuous learning and improvement and bring them to non-product teams? Human resources, finance, legal, all of them have a use for these services. And so I'm reinventing myself by taking the same material that I've been teaching and putting it in a new context. And that allows me to, again, create these new opportunities and drive them towards me. And so what I'm curious about, we're going to run a poll now. Paul, poll time.
Perfect.
Which is great. This is the poll that we're running, right? I'm curious for the folks who are tuning in at the moment, of these 5 qualities, which would you say is your strongest quality?
Okay, Jeff, so we've got the poll open to everyone, so we'll just give it a few moments for everyone to answer. Just to the audience, keep your questions coming in. Obviously, we'll have a Q&A section at the end of the webinar, and we'll put forward all your questions to Jeff. So we're around 80% complete. We'll just give it a few more moments. Excellent. So results time. So we've had 13% say entrepreneurialism, 14% say self-confidence, 56% say continuous learning, 12% say improvement, and 6% say reinvention.
Interesting. That's great. Look, that's super interesting, and thank you for sharing your thoughts there, folks. Look, continuous learning is going to drive that improvement and ultimately that reinvention, right? Those ideas are going to come from that. So I think it's good to hear. The other thing that doesn't really surprise me is that self-confidence is always one of the lowest ones. I run this poll every time I give a talk like this, and self-confidence always seems to be one of the lowest ones, and so does entrepreneurialism. Self-confidence comes with practice. So practicing sharing your ideas, practicing engaging in conversation, and the entrepreneurialism part really forces you to think deeply about things that you've done in your past that fall into that category. And again, you can think as when I was a kid, I used to take a bag of candy, Jolly Ranchers. I don't know if everybody knows what those are, but in the US, they're a pretty hot commodity when I was a kid. And you could buy a bag of Jolly Ranchers with, I don't know, 30, 40, 50 pieces of candy in the bag. It was a hard candy for $3 or $4 at the time, and maybe it was $2. And then I would go to school and I'd sell them for $0.25 a piece, right? And make, $5, $6 off the bag. Again, that's entrepreneurialism. If you did that as a kid, well, you were thinking that way as well. And so just to kind of keep it, keep you motivated, that you probably do have some entrepreneurial spirit in you as well. It's nice to see that continuous learning is in there as well. Terrific. Now, so those were the 5 qualities. I want to talk about the 5 steps that I took to kind of get to where I am today with this particular platform. And I'm going to give you examples of each one as well. And then we'll wrap it up and we can do Q&A. So these are the 5 steps, and I cover all these in detail in the book, but they're plant a flag, tell your story, follow the new path, teach, and give it all away. Let's look at the first one. Step 1, plant a flag. And oh man, I miss music festivals. Every time I see this slide, I'm a big music festival guy. Every time I see this slide, I was like, oh, music festivals. I love them. Look, planting a flag is you making a decision about what you're going to be known for, right? What are people going to know you for? When they say, Jeff Gothelf, I want them to associate something very explicit with my name. And you've got to decide what you want that to be. Now, the interesting thing with this exercise is that it's an exercise in right sizing, right? So if you go too broad, like for example, if you just said marketing, right? It's massive. Like you're about market. What kind of marketing? Direct marketing, digital marketing, marketing in real estate marketing, healthcare. Like what's the discipline that you're in, right? So you've got to start to narrow it down more than marketing, because otherwise it's too generic, it's too nebulous. Nobody will know what to come to you for. If you get too small, you reduce the audience that would be a target audience for you once you plant your flag to being not useful to you. So for example, if you're like, look, I do marketing for veterinary clinics in Ecuador, right? That's a pretty small market, right? Not that there's anything wrong with doing marketing for veterinary clinics in Ecuador, but there's just not a lot of them. It's not enough of an audience. And so you really need to kind of find that right size that says it's specific enough for me to stand out, but big enough to have an audience that will send opportunities my way. And the people who have done this well, right, become synonymous with the flag that they've planted. Let me show you some examples. So Eric Ries wrote one of the better selling business books of the last decade, and he is known as the lean startup guy, right? When people say Eric Ries or lean startup, those are basically synonymous, right? He's the lean startup guy. Jake Knapp also wrote one of the better selling business books of the last 5 or 6 years. Jake Knapp is the design sprint guy. He wrote a book called Sprint. And if your organization does design sprints, they know Jake Knapp. And you say Jake Knapp, it's design sprints. My friend over in Switzerland, Alex Osterwalder, reinvented business models, business model generation, business model canvases. That's Alex's flag. We know him for that. Seth Godin, right? We know Seth really is the marketing guy, although he's much more than marketing these days. He's personal branding and leadership and podcasting and all of these types of things, but that's where he's planted his flag. In the US, there's a comedian in the US named Sarah Cooper. She planted her flag doing Trump impersonations and lip syncs and that type of thing. She's known as the Trump impersonator. That's her flag. And then for me, right, the flag that I planted initially was Lean UX. Lean UX was the first book that I wrote, and it was the combination of doing really excellent software digital design, which I'd been doing for over a decade, and mixing it with agile software development, which was a big issue for my team, my organization, as well as many, many other organizations out there. So my flag wasn't design, and it wasn't software engineering. It was, how do you do user experience design in agile software engineering, right? Which was a big enough flag and helped me really establish my platform. And by the way, this book is now, by the end of this year, we will have published the 3rd edition of this book. This conversation continues, and then that flag continues to bear fruit. Now, you may ask yourself, you may say, Jeff, well, how do I figure out where to plant my flag? And there's a lot of different ways to do this. But one of the things that I've discovered since I wrote the book is this amazing exercise called ikigai. Ikigai is a Japanese word, a Japanese concept meaning for reason for being. Now, this is a westernization of that concept. So if you look up the original ikigai, it is quite different from this. So this is a bit of a westernization of it, but I really like this format because this format forces you to answer 4 questions. What do you love? Right? What are your passions? What are your expertises? What are you good at? Those aren't necessarily the same things, right? I love basketball. I'm not good at it, right? What do you love? What are you good at? What does the world need? And what can you be paid for? And the idea is to answer these questions individually and then try to find answers that ultimately tick all 4 boxes. They're things that you love, that you're good at, that the world needs, and that you can get paid for. And the things that land right there in the center, those are terrific places to start to think about planting your flag. And this is a great exercise, and you can grab this template off my website as well if you want to run this exercise on your own. So that's step 1, plant your flag, and very, very important. Step 2 is tell your story. Once you've identified what you're going to talk about, well, now you got to tell your story. And this is where people immediately get stuck, right? Because the biggest obstacle is, well, what unique story do I have? We get in our heads and we let doubt take over. Everyone's got good experience. She has more to offer than I do. My story isn't extraordinary enough to be unique. Everything's already been said, right? Here's the thing. The best part of your experience, of your story, is not whether you've built and sold a company or run an ultra marathon or climbed Everest or worked with celebrities or whatever it is. The best part of your experience is that nobody else has it. Right? Only you've done it. Only you can tell that story and nobody else can, because you're the only person to have gone through everything that you have in the ways and in the timings that you have. Only you have that perspective. Start with that. That really humanizes the conversation. Now look, for me, I started telling my story on August 12th, 2010. The date's important because it's 2.5 years after my 35th birthday. This stuff takes time. It took me a long time to get there. And I gave my first talk ever about building UX and Agile together at an Agile conference somewhere in the United States. First time I ever gave a talk about this. A month later in Paris was the first time I ever said Lean UX on stage. It was at an event where I finally got an opportunity to give a talk about Lean UX. And again, 2.5 years after my 35th birthday is the first time I'm actually saying Lean UX to the public. And it took a full 3 years after my 35th birthday to get my first truly big break after 3 years of talking and presenting and writing about Lean UX. On March 7th, 2011, Smashing Magazine published this article from me. It was called Lean UX, Getting Out of the Deliverables Business. And the reason why this is a big moment for me is because in 2011, Smashing had 1 million readers online. Today, they're probably 10 million. But that took the conversation global for me. And all of a sudden, I have more and more and more opportunities now coming in, right? So the more I tell my story, the more opportunities I'm attracting to tell my story even more. And this was a really big break because now I'm out there telling the story on various stages. People are inviting me to come in and talk about Lean UX. And now I'm testing out all of these other channels to figure out how to best reach my target audience. I'm tweeting and I'm writing on Medium and I'm posting on LinkedIn and Quora. I tried Facebook. I started an email newsletter. I tried and continue to try every channel, and this is about Lean UX. Honestly, the only thing we stopped short of doing was Lean UX the musical. We thought about doing that briefly. I decided that that was a bad idea and moved off of that very quickly. Now look, in hindsight, and kind of thinking about this more applicable to you, why did my story resonate? My story resonated because I was solving a problem many people had. The challenge of doing great design and great software engineering together in a modern way is a difficult one for almost every organization today. So I'm helping to solve a real problem that many people had. So there's an audience for this. I was doing the work. I had actual real world experience. This wasn't academic. This wasn't hypothetical. I was actually doing the work. And so I had real firsthand experience, and I was sharing that experience in a humble way. Very, very, very critical point. I was sharing the wins and the losses. So it wasn't like a steady stream of, oh my God, I'm so smart. Oh, the team is so great. Oh, we crushed this. We knocked it out of the park. It's like, hey, we tried this and it worked. Maybe you can try it. Hey, we tried this and it was a disaster. And here's what we learned from it, right? And that humility builds authenticity and it builds connection with your audience. And every single time that I did that, I made sure to provide something practical, something tactical for people to do. I'm doing that right now, by the way, as well, in case you haven't noticed, right? It's very meta here. And all of this builds an authentic connection with my audience, right? That's absolutely key to all of this, right? And so as you start to tell your story, right? Just a couple tips for getting your story heard, right? Because there's a lot of noise out there. Follow leaders in your fields. Wherever you planted your flag, follow them and then join their conversation politely, right? Engage in conversation with them, ask questions, share your work regularly through social media, through newsletters, through talks, or whatever it is, and make sure that you're adding value. Make sure you're building on top of the conversation, not just adding to the noise. And when you start to get feedback on ideas that work, scale those ideas, write more about those ideas, and let the other ones go, because now you're getting market feedback that says, this is good, keep doing it. Plant your flag, tell your story. Step 3, follow the new path or the new paths. What's interesting is as you start to tell your story and as it starts to resonate and your message gets amplified, people start to offer you new opportunities to do things. This was happening for me. I used to do design work, and I was doing less and less design work as Lean UX became much more popular, because now I'm traveling around the world, teaching workshops, speaking at conferences, etc. And it was terrifying me that I was not doing as much design work anymore, because that was my job up until that point. And yet I was doing this thing exactly to attract these kinds of opportunities. And it turns out that the more you do this, the more opportunities come to you. Now, one thing I learned in my journey is that book publishers go to conferences and they look for people who are speaking on the latest topics and who have the authority to speak about them, and they offer them book deals. That's exactly what happened to me. I was speaking at a conference, and O'Reilly, a book publisher, a technical book publisher, came up to me and offered me the opportunity to write the Lean UX book. It was terrifying to me to do it, because this was going to pull me even further away from doing design work. But this is exactly why I started telling my story. And so I signed up and I said, I'm going to write this book. I just didn't tell O'Reilly the very, very important secret that I had no idea how to write a book. I figured it out. I'd have to figure it out along the way. Now, look, you're going to say, Jeff, you were lucky. You got a book deal. I said, you're right. I was lucky. Absolutely. But I absolutely believe that luck is what happens when you're prepared for that opportunity. So if you're telling your story successfully and you're sharing these things and these opportunities, you start to attract these opportunities towards you. You've built your platform. Then when those opportunities come, you need to be ready to take them, right? That's what following the new path means. And I took on that book challenge, even though I didn't know how to write a book, and it sucked. It was brutal. It took me 2 years to get this book done. I burned through 3 editors. I wrote the manuscript 4 times, start to finish, before they agreed to publish it. But nevertheless, 5 years. I'm now 40. I'm now old. I'm now scared that I'm not going to be able to feed my kids. Lean UX goes live, and it does tremendously well. To date, it's sold well over 100,000 copies. We're actively writing the 3rd edition right now. It's going to be out in the fall. Continues to be a key component of my platform. I'm still the Lean UX guy to this day. So you've planted your flag, you've told your story, you're following the new paths. The next thing you need to do is teach. Teaching is taking every opportunity that you have to practice your story, to get smarter at your craft. Say yes to everything: workshops, conferences, webinars, podcasts, guest articles, interviews. I do it all, because every time that you teach, you get better at telling your story. And if you can teach something effectively to someone, you can actually do it better. And if you're telling your story, if you're teaching, then you start to identify gaps in your understanding, gaps in your content, and you can go learn, practice that continuous learning to get smarter, level up, and then share again, right? Any and all of these opportunities. Now, you can do this externally. If you work in-house at an organization, there's plenty of opportunities for you to teach in-house. There's no reason why you can't take these same exact ideas and practice them within your organization, right? Make your organization smarter. And what ends up happening is that you make the hiring brand of the organization better, because they see people doing really good work at your company and they want to come work for you. Now, the 5th and final step before I wrap this up and take your questions, so start thinking about your questions, putting them in the questions box as well, is to give it all away. This is the thing that's taken me the longest to learn. It's unintuitive, and it took me, if I can save you some time in getting you to believe this, it'll amplify your success or speed up your success significantly. Give your work away for free as much as you can, okay? Now, you're saying, well, Jeff, listen, I've been working professionally for 20 years or 30 years, 15 years, or whatever it is. I have experience and expertise, and I expect to be paid for it. I hear you, and I agree with you. Here's the unintuitive part of this. The more you give away to your community, the more you share back, the more content that you create, the more teaching that you do, the more storytelling that you do to your industry, your profession, the more comes back to you. The more you do it generously and selflessly, the more opportunities end up coming back to you. And this stuff lives forever. This is the internet. I got an email today, literally 3 hours ago, that said, hey, Jeff, it's been a while since we've chatted. It was someone I knew 10 years ago. She said, I read this article that you wrote here. And she gave me the link. I think I wrote that article 6 years ago, maybe 5 years ago. She goes, we'd like to bring you in and talk about how you can help us fix these problems in our organization. Right? The more you give away, the more comes back to you. And so to achieve this, you've got to make your work and yourself easily findable and accessible, right? Post your materials publicly where they'll be found and indexed by Google, articles, webinars, podcasts, blog posts. Post them all publicly and make sure that people know how to get in touch with you once they find that material. For me, I've now consolidated everything under my own brand, under my own URL, because I have enough of a presence now, enough of a platform that people will know to come to look for me. And so I do everything there, and it's fairly findable, right? But if you don't have a platform, start on Medium, start on Substack, start on Twitter, start on LinkedIn, anywhere that has an opportunity for you to share your content. And take opportunities to build your community locally. You don't have to do this on a global scale. You can start small, right? Local meetups, local conferences, give a free talk at a local business, ask a friend if you could come in and practice your talk for them, build that goodwill, build that community. It goes a very, very long way. When I used to travel for work back in the olden times, if I had a paid gig during the day, I always did a free community gig at night. The photo here is me just doing a meetup in Berlin after spending a day with a client out there. All right, let's wrap this up because I want to make sure you've got at least 15 minutes for Q&A on this. A few things to remember. Staying relevant, building that platform means you have to stay active. It's an ongoing, this is work, and it's work you're going to have to do continuously. Conversations, presence in the industry, contributing to the not just to the conversations, but to the canon, right? To the materials that make up the foundations of your expertise and your domain. You have to participate. If you're looking to shift from one thing to the next or reinvent from one thing to the next, in my experience, give yourself a couple years to get there. The idea of me doing work with HR teams started 2 years ago. I really had no HR credentials whatsoever, but I started talking about it and writing about it and engaging HR folks in conversations to the point where today I'm a part of that dialogue and I'm getting invitations to participate in their events and to do work with HR teams. Give yourself the time to do that. Look, the path I shared with you today is mine. It's what's worked for me. Take the parts that make sense for you. Discard the parts that don't make sense for you. There are many, many other options, right? With my, to talk about my expertise, but also my privileges as well. This is what worked for me. But if you carve a path through academia, exec education, whatever it is, there's lots of ways to get there, right? And then kind of to bring this home, I like this Bezos quote because he's the richest man in the world. And so we should try to learn a couple things from him every now and again. And one of the things that Bezos says, people always ask him is, what's going to change in the next 5 years? And Bezos always says, well, I don't think about my business that way. I think about what's not going to change over the next 10 to 20 years. And I focus on those things, the things that I know are true for the long term. And so as you think about planting your flag, think about what people are going to need for the next 10 to 20 years without change, the things that are not going to change. Plant your flag there and then grow, evolve your delivery methods over time. And that will begin your path to becoming forever employable. And so with that, first of all, thanks so much for coming and thanks so much for listening. I really, really appreciate it. If you haven't picked up a copy of the book, it's available anywhere that you buy books online, so Amazon and any other digital outlet. as well. In every format, you can listen to it, you can download it, or you can get a physical copy as well. I'm going to get to as many questions as I can, but that's my email address on screen. Please email me if you have any questions at all that don't get answered or that come up after the fact. If you want the slides from today, the URL at the top, jeffgothelf.com/slides, just go there. And then lastly, the last plug I'll make, and then I promise I'll stop talking for just a couple of seconds and let Paul ask me some questions, is I run a cohort-based class called Becoming Forever Employable, where I teach this to a small cohort of mid-career professionals about how to do this. We ship every week. We work together for 10 weeks. And if you want more information, go to becomingforeveremployable.com. We are filling up the next cohort. It starts in just a little bit more than a month from today, and I'd love to see you there. Okay, so with that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and I'm going to see what kind of questions you have.
Thanks, Jeff. So excellent session, really insightful. Great to hear, obviously, your career, and obviously a lot of insightful and obviously points to take into all our careers. So I've had some questions come in via email for people who are unable to attend. So just for everyone to know, keep your questions coming in. We've got a good 10-15 minutes to put these forward to Jeff, and obviously he has kindly agreed to follow up after this session with any unanswered questions. So thanks for that, Jeff. So the first question I'm going to put forward to you, I've had it come in. It's talking around what are your thoughts on needing a personal social media profile when looking for new opportunities? Do you think that LinkedIn is just sufficient enough?
You absolutely have to be present on social media. This is the marketing channel now, like as a whole, right? So now the question is, which channel is the best? LinkedIn is. Listen, I'm having tremendous luck with LinkedIn. I used to, as the kids say, I used to sleep on LinkedIn. Don't sleep on LinkedIn anymore. It has really become a terrific channel for engaging in adult, and I mean that in the kind of the mature conversations, business conversations, interesting conversations, building a network, sharing events, learning. LinkedIn is professionally, LinkedIn is has been a terrific source for me. It's a great place to start. I would also explore other channels. Your goal ultimately is to own your audience, right? So anytime you're posting on social media and building a following there, you're renting that audience, right? You're renting and you're paying for that rent with your content and with your attention. And so, yes, you're building a following, yes, you're building a presence, yes, you're generating leads, but ultimately LinkedIn owns that audience. And so what you ultimately want to do is you want to create a situation where you have a direct connection with that audience. And that generally these days is email newsletters. So while you may start on LinkedIn, you definitely ultimately want to drive people to sign up for some kind of a newsletter with you so that you can have a direct conversation with them, number one. And then you want to explore some of the other platforms. Now, look, I've been on Twitter for a long time. I like Twitter. I find it valuable. I've been successful at using it both as a fun personal channel as well as a professional lead gen channel and sharing my content. I've built up a community there over the years, and I fine-tune. People say Twitter's a dumpster fire of abuse and partisan politics, and it can be. That's your choice about who to follow. But if you want to use it professionally, you can create kind of that professional presence on there. I like Twitter a lot, but there's a lot. Look, I don't use Facebook products, but you certainly are welcome to give Facebook a shot. Quora, hit or miss these days. Quora is interesting. Reddit is an interesting place to try. Substack as a kind of a newsletter and private publishing channel is big these days. Clubhouse, we're all experimenting with Clubhouse at the moment. Is it going to be a thing? Is it not going to be a thing? I don't know. But you're going to build these experiments, right? So you need to test. YouTube is fantastic, right? So you need to test channels, formats for your content, and then analyze how well that did. Did you reach your audience? Did they reach back out to you? Did they share your stuff? And if not, try a different channel before you invest heavily, right? Before you convert your garage into a YouTube studio, right? Take a, here, I've got one right here. Like take a $10, €10 tripod, put your phone on it, point it at your face, and record 3 minutes and pop it up on YouTube or on LinkedIn and see if people respond to videos, right? So all kinds of ways to test these ideas before you invest heavily in a channel. But from a professional aspect, definitely invest some time in LinkedIn. I think you'll find some good rewards there.
Excellent, fantastic. So we've had a question come in around what you just spoke about at the back end of the presentation. So it's about planting the flag. So they're asking, what would you recommend in terms of planting the flag for someone with a various background? Any tips?
With what kind of background?
Variety of background, obviously, different industries to almost find their niche.
So I like to answer questions with stories. I like telling stories. It's genetic. I got it from my father. Hopefully, I'll be able to tell them a bit more quickly than he does. But we'll see how it goes. In any case, when I set out to plant my flag, I had two choices. One was Lean UX. The other was vintage electric pianos. You saw that I'm a keyboard player in those bands. Back when I lived in the US, I had a collection of vintage electric pianos. And I knew I still to this day know a stupid amount of knowledge about vintage electric pianos. And I thought about planting my flag there. You know, it's my passion. I love it. I could, if my wife would have allowed me, I would have had 50 electric pianos in my house, not just 5. 5 was the most I could get away with. The reality is, though, that from a market sizing perspective, there were tons of people struggling with design and agile software engineering. And there was about me and 17 other piano nerds who cared about vintage electric pianos. And so from a market size perspective, for me, that was a no-brainer, right? So as you're considering multiple passions, expertise, backgrounds, interests, really start to think about, well, where is there an audience that could sustain me for the foreseeable future? Your goal here is to future-proof your career. Right? So if there's 1,000 people who care about what you're going to say, that's not sustainable for 5 years or 10 years or 20 years. But if there's 5 million people who care about what you say, or 500,000, okay, now we're talking, right? And so really sort of think about from a market size perspective, right? You're a product, right? You're a product that provides a service to a particular market, right? You want to make sure that you've got enough of a market base to be successful. And if there's a couple things that are kind of the same weight, 2 or 3 things that might be the same weight for you, then you run experiments. Again, so this is kind of where a lot of that lean thinking, that lean startup thinking, design thinking comes into play, right? You want to run experiments and run some tests in these various domains, these various industries, and get a sense of where you're getting a response, where you're getting some feedback, and then amplify the places where you're getting feedback, and then starve the places where you're not getting feedback of your energy, because you're going to have to focus at some point. The risk is trying to be 3 different things at the same time, because then people really don't know what you stand for, right? Like, when should I come to you? And this has been really interesting for me, because when I started with Lean UX, well, it was really clear. I'm the Lean UX guy. I help design and product teams come together and integrate design into software development. Cool. I then wanted to have a bigger conversation about organizational agility, digital transformation, managing the outcomes, that type of thing. And everybody's like, well, that's great, Jeff, but you're the Lean UX guy. Lean UX guys talk to the UX team and the product team, right? And so I wrote another book. I wrote a book called Sense and Respond, and we published it with Harvard Business Review Press. And it's a business book for leaders. And then all of a sudden, I'm the Sense and Respond guy, right? So it took me a long time to get there, but to expand that bubble. And now, you know, with this book, the interesting thing here is that this is a kind of a big shift for me here as well. And I'm still struggling to figure out how exactly to tell the story that says, you know, Lean UX guy, Sense and Respond, organizational management guy, career guy. Like, how does that work, right? And so really focusing on the thing where you're getting a lot of interest is a great place to start. Worry about expanding that in the future once you've been successful with one thing.
Perfect, excellent. So another question. So how can organizations ensure that their employees have the time and tools to remain current in their jobs?
How? By encouraging them to learn, by incentivizing it, by making it the path of least resistance, right? So if I got to go to my boss every year, every review cycle, whatever that is, and be like, please, can I have $500 to go to this conference? Or can I have like I'm teaching an objectives and key results master class next month, it costs $90, right? Of the 130 people who have signed up for that masterclass so far, I guarantee you at least half of them had to go to their boss and be like, can I have $90 to go to this class, right? That's ridiculous to me, right? We have to make, if we want to encourage our employees to stay current, we have to reward it, we have to incentivize it, and we have to make it the path of least resistance. So for example, you can say, look, you've got an annual training budget of $1,500 a year, spend it how you wish. I want to know what you're doing, and I want to know how you're applying it to your day-to-day job, right? So like if I want to spend $90 on a master class and I've got my own budget, I don't need to get my boss to approve it. That's the path of least resistance. And then we have to build learning as a performance management criteria. This is so rare, right? We still, so many organizations operate like factories operate, even though all of us are basically technology companies these days, right? We still operate like factories, and we reward people for production, right? How much stuff did you make? Now, unless you're on the factory floor, you know, making Sharpies, right? How much stuff you made is irrelevant, right? So why are we measuring that? Why are we incentivizing that? Why is that a performance management criteria? Instead, to answer your question, right, a performance management criteria should be like, learn 3 new things this year and apply them at work, right? And then you can then say, look, what 3 new things, 3 new skills or 3 new things did you learn this year, and how did you apply them at work? Right? That becomes far more interesting than, did you ship 70 features this year, which is 20 more than last year, right? So this is how we do that.
Excellent, fantastic. So I've had a couple of questions which have come in from people around their late 30s, early 40s, and they want to obviously have some advice from yourself because they're looking to switch careers and they don't really feel like they currently fit in. What would your advice be for someone in their late 30s looking to switch careers?
To switch careers. So so your opportunity now is to engage in the new community. Right? So beginner's mind, right? If you've ever heard that phrase, beginner's mind, it's amazing, right? You're going to enter a new field having minimal experience in it. And so use that to your advantage. Start to engage. There's thought leaders in literally every profession, right? And they're on LinkedIn, they're on Twitter, they're on Facebook, they're on Instagram, Substack, whatever, right? Engage those thought leaders. Sit in. Listen, read their materials, read their threads, read their conversations, and then ask questions. Ask questions, but don't ask questions that are like, you can ask the beginner's questions, right? The beginner's mind questions, but make sure there's enough thought behind it and some evidence that you've actually read that person's stuff or that you've engaged in their content. Like when people come to me and they're like, Jeff, what is UX? I don't even answer that question, because you're wasting my time, right? You're not even trying at that point. If somebody comes up to me and says, Jeff, listen, I know that in Lean UX, you wrote about how to do this particular practice. How do you see that practice happening in my industry, which is real estate? Okay, I'll answer that question every day, all day, because someone has taken the time to be a bit more thoughtful and explicit in their request. And that's what you can do. You can ask the entry-level questions, the beginner's mind questions, right? And that's how you start to build your presence in an industry, right? You're part of the discourse, you're asking good questions, maybe you're challenging some things because, hey, from your perspective, coming from a different line of work, right, this doesn't make sense, and you might have people start rethinking their own approaches. That's powerful, and you can share that, and you can write about that. And so to me, that is the best thing that you can do, is seek out that community, and they exist everywhere, and then start engaging thoughtfully, politely, and start consuming that content. And then eventually start to form your own opinions and start to share those back.
Excellent, thanks, Jeff. So it looks like we're out of time, but I'll keep the questions coming forward to you following the webinar. And obviously, everyone has got a chance afterwards to keep typing their questions if you've got a question for Jeff. So I'd just like to say thank you. It's been an excellent webinar, really insightful. Just so the audience know, I've had a few questions come in. This has been recorded, so don't worry, we'll send the recording out to you a week from today. So you'll just get an email from Amber and BJ to say that the recording is available, and you can click the link and you'll be able to see the presentation again. Just regarding next webinar, so our next webinar is taking place on the 14th of April at 12 p.m. GMT. That's with John Blakely, and he's going to be discussing 9 habits for the new world of work. So if you'd like to attend that webinar, head over to our website, and you'll be able to find all the information regarding this session, obviously, how to join that session. So lastly, just like to say thank you again, Jeff, for a great session. It's personally helped me great, and thank you for taking the time out to attend this session. So
my pleasure.
Thank you.
Thanks
And we look forward to seeing everyone at the next webinar. Thank you.
Okay, bye everybody. Thank you.
Bye-bye.